Hey everybody, very good to see you all. I keep saying to everybody, I'm like, wow, you're so much bigger than your Twitter profile picture, in real life. Good to see that you people actually exist. Really, really good to meet you all. And thank you so much for having me. Kind of surprised in a way to be invited to do this. But it's been a bit of a kind of bucket list kind of item for me for a while to try and get into this kind of space. So exceedingly grateful to be here, and especially with the competition that's going on over there in the bleachers, very, very glad that you've chosen to spend your time here with me. So if I can fathom this hardware out over here. So this is me. Also, going on from what Chad said earlier in his talk, this is what I look like. And yeah, I am an international lawyer by training. I worked in a bunch of different kind of organizations, the Red Cross, United Nations, and I'll go into a little bit more about that kind of background, if you like. But there was a point at which I kind of decided that I didn't really want to do that anymore. And there are so many stories from people that I have spoken to already and that I'm hearing speak here that sounds like a similar thing, right? There's plenty of people that had careers that are so different to what they're doing now. And again, so it's great to be in a room full of people where I'm like, yeah, I was a lawyer, but I don't really want to do that anymore, and everybody gets it. That's really nice. So as I say, this is me now. I build and sell products, and what I really want to talk to you about today is what I'm calling the story from the middle. And what that means is that this is not the very beginning of my journey, and hopefully it's not the end of it, but this is what it looks like in the midst of building and selling and not having these blockbuster, enormous successes, but having a sufficient number of smaller successes that enable you to do this kind of thing full time. And I don't think we hear that story very often. We very much hear about people that have sold their companies for millions and millions. We don't hear about the people that sell their companies for hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands. And so that's basically what I want to share with you guys today is my story from the middle. This is happening right now. Yesterday when I arrived at the hotel, project that I'm working on, the new SaaS that I'm working on with Cameron, who's sat here in the front row. We met for the first time yesterday, and he is my co-founder on a new project, and we're literally doing this right now. We're probably going to do it again later. So this is very much happening in real life right now, and I hope that you can find this story to be interesting and maybe helpful and hopefully a little bit inspirational. So 3 things that I want to talk about today. First is my story. I think it's so important in this no-code space to share stories of people that have gone from, being lawyers, being accountants, being pro footballers, whatever it is, moving into a completely different world and feeling like you can actually do this, like you can have a lot of success in this space without being a traditional sort of computer science software developer background. So I just want to add my story to the wealth of those stories, just to kind of encourage more people to get into the space if they think it's something that they could be interested in. Second thing I want to share is my sort of blueprint for doing this, and I wish I'd seen more people share their stories and share their kind of blueprints when I started. So I'm not saying that this is the way to do it, but I am saying that this is a way of doing it, and if you can take anything useful from it, then I hope that you do. And the last thing is I want to talk about bidding wars a little bit. And again, I don't want to exaggerate this and make it sound like this huge thing that it's not. But in several of the products that I have sold, I've managed to start a little bit of a bidding war. And maybe I listed something for 10,000 and it sold for 20. But the point is, I think there is a kind of a way to get people really invested in what you're selling. And I've noticed a pattern in the small number of projects that I've sold where you can kind of create these little bidding wars, and it really feels good when you build something that people want. So that's me. First thing, though, can you guys help me to win a bet and take a selfie with me? Because my girlfriend told me that I wouldn't do this, and I said I bloody well will. So if you guys could give her a wave from up here on the no-code stage, here we are, we love you. And yeah, I've won a bet, but I'm not going to embarrass myself by telling you what I've won. All right, so here we are, the beginning of the story. I've hinted at a little bit of this already, but my life before no code was very different. So as I said, I'm an international lawyer by training, and I was also an academic. And I studied and taught at a number of universities, most recently at Harvard and Oxford. And this basically was my world. Like, I spent most of my time kind of, in lecture halls, giving lectures and teaching people about international law. And then I spent every second that I could really going out into the real world and trying to make a difference. So the picture in the top left is Monrovia in Liberia, and I was working as a lawyer prosecuting soldiers that were committing sex crimes against children. This is a U.S. naval ship and a hospital ship, and I wrote the rules around how to get aid into war zones and into disaster zones. And somewhere up there, about there, was my office when I worked in New York, and it was like the best view ever, except you realize that you're like, everybody else got lunch before you did, basically, because you're like too high up in the building. But yeah, so I feel like my life was very different before this, and there basically came a point where, despite how wonderful this world is, and despite the massive opportunity that you get in this world, it doesn't pay well, and it doesn't really pay at all in a lot of situations. So I did all of this basically on scholarships and on working part-time. There was a point where I was teaching at 4 different universities, and I would do a day in Oxford. I would then drive up to Birmingham, and I'd teach at Birmingham for a day. I'd go across to Warwick. Another day, I was teaching at the Open University, which, for those of you that don't know, is like an online university in the UK. So I was teaching at all these different places, balancing that with scholarships. And then to make ends meet, I was basically building and selling small, tiny, little companies. And so, as I say, I was spending so much time in these different worlds, doing these different things, and I really found that the thing that I loved the most, actually, was kind of hacking away on my laptop in, a coffee shop, trying to figure out the next little thing that I would build and sell. So I came to a point where the workload was just absolutely insane. I mean, I would get a call on, a Thursday night in the UK telling me that I had to be back in New York on a Monday morning, and there was no funding for this, by the way, so it's like, can you, figure that out as well? And I did this, and I really wanted to be in this space for a while, and I set myself a goal that I would finish my PhD and I would publish my work, and then I would move on. And that kind of realization, I guess, happened at the same time that I thought this. Which means flip this switch that I spelt wrong, right? That's what that means. And yeah, I had this realization. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I can't keep bouncing between all these different worlds. And so, as I say, I set myself a personal goal of finishing something that was meaningful to me, and then decided that I was going to move on. And I think a lot of you maybe feel quite familiar with that feeling of like being in the careers that you were told you should be in. I remember somebody important to me said to me when I was a kid, you can be a doctor or a lawyer, like pick. And I ended up being both, but not the useful doctor. So if anybody collapses with how good this talk is, I'm not useful at all, okay? Don't do it. So yeah, I had this feeling, and I was like, I just don't want to do this anymore. And so I stopped doing that, and I decided to go into the startup world, and I worked as a consultant for a startup for a while. And I set myself this little plan. And the plan was I wanted to work for myself, be completely unemployable, so there's no threat of these JOBs coming at me anytime soon. I wanted to be able to work from anywhere. I lived in the States at the time, and I was traveling a lot back and forth to the UK, so I wanted to still be able to do that. And I also wanted to be able to work without any sort of long-term commitments. I didn't want to be stuck in any particular field. I didn't want to be stuck in any particular office. Like, I didn't want a working pattern. I didn't want any of these things that I'd felt so restricted by before. And so that's what I kind of said. I was like, right, this is going to be my starting point. I'm going to start again, basically. And what came from that was really stumbling into this world of being able to build and later sell things. And so this matched up with what I wanted to do pretty well. So I was kind of saying to myself, right, what's something that I can build and then learn the thing at the time, the platform or the process or the industry, whatever it is, learn it, and then move on again. And so that's essentially what happened. So the first thing It's funny, actually, that Chad's talk came before this, because the first thing that I ever built in Bubble with AI was a contract analyzer, where you could copy and paste a clause from a particular contract into this tool. I called it Ask Ruth, after Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And and I was like, I'm going to slowly hack away at this legal profession that I think holds people hostage often, right? You're paying people by the hour for arguably the most stressful times in your life, and you have this ticking time bomb of of the money that you're having to spend to get yourself out of this situation. And I started kind of looking for ways to figure out how to undo pieces of the legal profession. And so that was the first thing that I started with. It was a contract analysis tool, if you like, that used AI to tell you what to do. Never did anything with that, because at the time, OpenAI wouldn't let you publish anything that was in the kind of legal space because of ethical concerns. It's moved on a lot since then, obviously. But that was like super early, so that's the first thing I ever built with Bubble and AI. And then I kind of moved on and started moving up what I saw as a bit of a kind of acquisition ladder, if you like. So I started with Ahavo, which was a content repurposing service. So the idea would be that, and this was purely service, all manual, and the idea would be like, hey, I wrote this piece of blog content, whatever it is, a blog article, turn it into 50 different tweets, or you get the idea. But you basically turn one thing into hundreds of other pieces of content. That's actually, if you're looking for an idea of something to hack together, I still think that would be pretty good. You could make a very good GPT wrapper out of that kind of idea, so feel free to steal that if you want. So that was the first thing that I sold, and I started it, started working on it, and decided that I was very bored very quickly, and so I sold the basically just the name, the domain name, and the initial kind of wait list that I had for something like $500, and I was like, right, I'm on the ladder. That's the first thing. That's my three-figure exit is right there, and I was very happy with that. The next thing that I sold was Shoutabout, and that, as you can see, is a PR platform that helps founders to get coverage for their projects. And so basically you would be able, and this was built in Bubble, you could basically log in, find journalists that were covering the types of stories, the kind of industry that you were in, and you could write emails to them, pitch them, and it would all kind of have all of your PR efforts in one place. We baked in some automations into that as well to help people to kind of do that as efficiently as possible. It's a horrendous manual task, like going through journalist databases and articles and trying to pitch people. And so we just tried to take some of that away. So that one sold in September 2022. I actually sold that earlier than I expected to, but I had to for health and personal reasons that I won't bore you with. But sold that one. The next one, Tabitha, is, or was, I think actually is now, but it's gone back into a different kind of space. Not sure if you guys can see under that, but it's an AI-powered teaching assistant that lives in your browser tab, hence tabitha.ai. That was acquired in February of 2023, and I actually sold that. There's a story of me building and selling a SaaS in an airport lounge. This was a separate acquisition in an airport lounge. So I had to fly back to the UK for a family health crisis, and I was like, I don't have time to run this right now. And so I listed it in New York, and I'd sold it by the time I landed in London. And I say that not to be braggy, but just to say that there is so much activity in this space, and there's so many people looking to buy these tiny, minuscule projects. These are not doing huge amounts of money, but they're doing enough for people to want to kind of jump in and get involved. So that's really the story of these tiny little acquisitions. I'm counting 11 acquisitions now. A lot of them I don't talk about for various reasons, like NDAs and stuff, when I sold them. But these are the ones that I've talked about on Twitter the most. They're not staggering sums of money. Let's be realistic here. They go into the 5 figures, the tens of thousands, but they're not huge amounts of money. But they are life-changing in the sense that it bought me the freedom to do this full-time. And that, I think, is such an important lesson. We tend to see people go, oh, I sold my company, sold it for millions, I can do whatever I want now kind of thing. I can do whatever I want, and I sold mine for tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands or even, millions. So that's just something to bear in mind, that there is a lot of freedom in this world if you actively seek it out like this. So how do I kind of get to this point? What does this kind of blueprint sort of look like? I mostly ideate new ideas through these 3 sort of mechanisms, if you like, nowadays. So the first one is personal experience. Like, I'm that annoying person that is like, God, this sucks. Like, what can we build to fix it? And I do it with absolutely everything, and it drives, my family wild. But basically, I'm always looking for things like challenges, inefficiencies, responsibilities, things that I have to do in my life that feel like they could be improved somehow through software. So just to give you an example, I am looking to invest in farmland in the UK at the moment, and I'm in the process now of looking at the listings and then looking at all the information that you can get in buying, or that you should be looking at, I should say, in buying farmland. And I've realized that as estate agents, many of them are using very outdated paper-based processes, if you can believe this, in 2024. And they are not only just doing this thing in a very inefficient way, but they're doing it in a way that breaches the Data Protection Act. And now, as a lawyer, I'm like salivating over this, because I'm like, oh, ugly, old manual process, that also breaks the law, like this is perfect. And so that is what Cameron and I are building, is a process to a platform to improve that. So that's just an example of how, like, me looking for land and doing something completely separate to my no-code work has led to me actually building now a SaaS in the prop tech, sort of legal tech space. Another one is keyword research, and if you haven't looked for business ideas with keyword research before, I would really encourage you to do this, because it is so incredibly powerful, and you can uncover ideas and you can uncover inspiration in just about any topic that you can think of. So what I look for is keywords that, this is, the golden keywords: high volume, low difficulty. Look for things that people are actively searching for already, right? There's people here that have built, entire products around this. Build the keyword is one, right? So there are people now that are building products around this process because it is so powerful. There's nothing to stop you from going onto Google and starting to type in keywords in your space and starting to type in questions in your space and just see what is auto-suggested to you, right? That will give you ideas. Additionally, you can go into tools like Ahrefs and SEMrush and these kind of things and look there and look into huge amounts of detail around these keywords and just see what you can come up with. Premium and expired domains is another one. There's nothing gives me greater joy as an indie hacker in finding a .com that is not available and then go and buying the .co, because we're in the tech space and we, for the most part, don't think that we're scammers if you've got a .co domain. But if you go look through the premium domain listings, you'll see some really good brandable names that maybe have the .com already, but you can get the .io, you can get the .co, the .co.uk, like whatever your geography is. You can get those, and chances are that people are then not going to buy on all of those squatters' domain names because there's somebody else in the space already. So you can find some really good ideas and brandable domains and brandable names that way as well. Same with expired domains. You can look at lists on, say, GoDaddy, for example. You will see thousands and thousands of domain names that are coming up for renewal, or somebody's missed the renewal, or whatever the specific situation as to why it's expiring is. You can see that, you can see all of these names that have been good enough for somebody else to have bought before, and often you will find some absolute gems in there. Some of them even have like very high value keywords kind of baked in as well. And so, as I say, it's just like it's a quick path to you getting a .com or a whatever TLD that you want. You can get it from an expired domain. So this, for the most part, is like how I come up with ideas for things nowadays. And the next thing is problem validation. So then I start looking at the problem itself. And these are the main sort of questions. I have some others, but these are the main kind of things that I'm asking myself. So, like, have I personally experienced, this problem or critical aspects of it? So with the PropTech SaaS that I just told you guys about, like, I'm actively trying to invest in farmland right now, and I don't want my data to be shared unlawfully, right? So it's something that I'm, like, thinking about as I'm doing it. It's something that I'm experiencing, and so I can then craft a product around it, and I have enough experience to know the problem and also later to be able to sell the problem to somebody else, which I will come back to. Is this a problem that costs people time or money? Believe me, they don't care about anything else. Somebody said to me once, well, what about reputation? Like, people want to look good. And I'm like, yeah, but why? So they can earn more money, right? It usually comes back to these two things, is time or money. So is it costing people time or money? If so, it's probably a good thing to look into. Next one, do I know where my target users hang out online? This is a really important one because so many people will build and then say, oh, actually, I don't really know where to find these people. So where do they hang out? Is it somewhere that I can get myself in? And then, does this have a reasonable hypothesis for how it can work and a clear financial line of sight? So this one is also incredibly important. I think everybody in this room probably has fallen into the trap of building or wanting to build something that sounds really cool, that looks really cool, that you think everybody needs, and then you find actually it's crickets when you launch because you haven't kind of done your initial research into the problem. So this is how I constrain that risk with myself now, is to say, does this have a reasonable hypothesis for how it works and a clear financial line of sight, which I will come back to. And then that bottom one, again, I don't know if you can see below the chairs, but can I easily rank for important keywords on Google? I do a lot of SEO, and SEO is one of my favorite kind of growth tactics in general, and so I'm always looking out for things that I can rank for on Google. So next one is personal validation. Is this something that I can't stop thinking about? That is a good sign for me. Like, if I am obsessively thinking about an idea, I know I can probably sustain enough effort to get it where I want it to go in a month, 6 weeks, 2 months, whatever the time frame is that I set myself. So that's something that I really want to be thinking about. Second one is, can I test this idea in the market within 1 to 2 weeks? This, I cannot stress enough how important this is. So many people will sit on an idea and they'll create something absolutely stunning, and it won't go anywhere, right? And I've been in a startup growth role as a chief growth officer at a startup that has this problem. And it's really sad to see, because they built something stunning. It's amazing, the thing. It's a financial technology platform. They've built something absolutely stunning. But the public has not seen it, and it's been in development for 2 years. They launched, and nobody did anything, right? Nobody really cared that much. And it's because there was so much obsession around building this beautiful thing. And I actually left on this principle. I was like, if we're not going to test it, you can keep your massive salary. Like, I'm not interested, and off I went. Because I feel so strongly about testing and about getting things out in public. So I really would encourage you to think carefully about that one. Third one, can I build and market this on my own? I do collaborate with people on a limited basis, but not often, to be quite honest, and I usually prefer to build things and market things on my own. That's also a bit of a kind of risk mitigator for me, because I just think if it doesn't work for whatever reason with this partnership, with this team, whatever it is, I can fall back on myself to be able to do it. Does it have low running costs? Fairly obvious one, but I don't want to spend tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or even thousands, honestly, getting something going when it hasn't been tested. My dad has a friend that has spent close to $1 million on his real-world business, and it's not going anywhere, and the guy is going to have to sell his house and everything. So it's a scary position to be in. And so I'm always thinking, does this have low running costs, and can I just get into it quickly? The fifth one, this is language that if you are part of the small bets community or you've read anything by Daniel Vassallo, you will be aware of what this means. So if this thing fails, will I still be clear of my absorbing barrier? The absorbing barrier is just basically the point at which you have to go back and work for somebody else, or you have to sell something to be able to sustain yourself for a long time. So basically, I'm looking at these projects and thinking, like, if I work on this for a month and then do nothing, like, am I having a big financial impact? Will I have to go work for somebody else? And I don't want that to be the case, and so I don't get myself into projects that would lead to that if they failed. And last one, does this fit in with my ideal lifestyle? We talked a little bit about that at the beginning, about not working for people, not having set times to work, being able to do things whenever I want, and that's something that I take very seriously. Last one is stackability, as I call it, and this is something that I've focused on a lot recently. I used to have a lot of projects that kind of worked together but didn't work brilliantly well together, and now I'm kind of in a position where I'm thinking, how can I leverage each of these different parts of the projects I'm working on to feed each other? So, for example, the land tender platform that I'm building with Cam, I'm thinking all the time, like, there's actually a listing directory that I could have, and I can stack that into that, become part of the marketing, and yet it can exist as a separate product. It can have its own revenue. So I'm constantly thinking about that as well. And then this one, hopefully, I think you will find quite interesting. So I literally do this with every single project. So I tie my financial planning and my hypothesis for a product to something very tangible. Right? So this 1.5 million is a farm that I really want to buy in Lincolnshire, where I am. And I'm working through to say, like, okay, well, how do I get from a position right now, looking at this project, to thinking, okay, like, what do I need to do? How many users do I need? What kind of price do I need to charge? That kind of thing. So I have this. It's very kind of rudimentary, and I'm sure any of you that are good at numbers will pick holes in this all day long. But the idea is that if I know that I need to be able to buy this house for 1.5 million, I know I need to sell it, because 50% tax in the UK, basically, for about 3 million. Then we get into all these details. So if I can get a 7x trailing 12-month profit multiple, then I need this much annual profit, then I need this much in revenue, blah, 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 blah. You can see, right? You can see as it works down. Feel free to take a picture if you want to borrow that yourself. And this is a good signal to me as to whether the thing that I want to build actually makes any sense. So I literally go through this, and I sit and I think, right, if I sell this thing for 99, the colored ones, by the way, are the ones that I can change the colored cells are the ones that you can change the inputs of. And yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. Like, I just go through it and see, like, does this actually make sense? Like, this thing that I think I can build, does it make sense financially? Is it going to get me where I want to go? So this is another part of it as well. Building. This is going to be a quick section, because in the entire time that I've done this, nobody has ever asked me a question about building, right? So my advice is simply this: build with what you know. So this is the stack that I typically use. I'm sure you recognize all of these logos. And I would say, for the sake of saving yourself time and getting the thing that you want to build out there in the public, being tested, see if people will pay you, just build with what you know, right? All these tools are awesome. They're very fun to learn, but just go build with what you actually know. And the last thing is bidding wars, and this is very quick advice, because again, I think the most of what people ask me about, and this is what I've built my presentation around, is like how I come up with the ideas in the first place, and how I validate them, and what makes me want to go in on a product. And the part at the end really comes down to some pretty basic advice, but you would be astounded the amount of people that ignore this, right? So the things that you do want to do is you want to create buzz around your product whenever you can, right? That sounds super obvious, but most people won't do it because it's hard. It requires consistency, and it means putting yourself out there, which means you could be rejected, and that hurts and it sucks, right? But do it. Do it at every opportunity that you can. Create buzz around what you're doing. And when you come to sell your product as well, ramp up to actually listing it, right? Don't just list it and be like, hey, it's on Microns, it's on acquire.com or whatever. By the way, I'm not in any way formally affiliated with acquire.com. I just love their platform, and I've been badgering them. I'm like, hey, sponsor me for this talk. Of course, they ignored me. So I'm just like, thank you anyway to acquire.com, because I can't do this without them. So yeah, create buzz around it. Whatever platform you're on, like, create buzz around what you're doing, and then list it. Next thing is sell the actual problem. Don't just sell your product, right? Make people realize that, like, even if your product is not perfect, the problem space that you're in is worth being in, and it's something that people will pay for. Craft a killer pitch. It sounds obvious, but some people's listings on these platforms are absolutely terrible, right? So just put the effort in, really put the effort into what you're doing, and create a pitch that makes people want to buy into what you're doing as well as buy into the actual project. Offer transition help. With every product that I sell, or for most products that I sell now, actually, I always say, listen, I'll work with you for 30 days afterwards, or for 2 weeks afterwards, or whatever's required. And that just helps the buyer of your product to feel like they have all of the support necessary, because there will be inevitably a million things that you've never thought of. And so offering that transition help is a big one. And last one is make documentation. I document absolutely everything when I'm building a new product nowadays, from the logins that I use to the flows that things are in, all of the automations, all of the sign-up pages, like absolutely everything. Document it as if, if you intend to sell your product, document from day one. Don't think, oh, I'll do it if I choose to sell. Like, do it now, because it takes a long time, and it's really one of the incredibly high-value things. Like, I put another 50% on the price of something that I sold because I documented everything. And this is an obvious one, but don't BS people. Like, people in this space are incredibly smart, and you would be staggered how many people go, oh, I've got this amazing product, like, I want to sell it, and they start telling this story for something that they can't actually justify, or they pitch their product in a way that doesn't actually make sense. And, like, I'm hoping none of you in this room would actually do that, but you would be astounded, honestly, at the number of people that do. So this, honestly, is my big advice for this one, is, like, just don't bullshit people, because people know, and people are smart enough to realize, like, where your product fits in the bigger picture. And somebody said, put a really good quote at the end, something inspiring. I'm like, I don't have anything to say other than just build awesome shit. Like, go do things with this incredible technology that we have, right? We're lucky to exist in a true meritocracy where it doesn't matter if you come from absolutely nothing and you've gone to something, or you come from loads of privilege as we traditionally understand it, and you've done something. Like, the privilege is that we can build whatever we want. Right, that's the privilege that we're in nowadays. So that's my quote. Build awesome shit and then go tell me about it. So down here is Twitter and LinkedIn. You can find me on either of those, and it would be a pleasure to learn about what you're doing, and I will help you out wherever I can. But yeah, thank you so much.
We do have time for 2 or 3 questions if we would like, if that's okay, Dr. Millie.
Yeah. I don't know who's going. We're over here, I think.
Can you hear me?
Just about, yeah.
Do these people that buy these products, like, I assume that they're buying them to like try to scale them or something like that. So do they ever? What do they say when it's not written in code? Like, if you're using no code, do you ever get buyers that get turned off by that?
Yeah, in my experience, nobody has even batted an eyelid that it was built in no code, honestly. Somebody, in fact, was pretty happy that it was. That's the only time the technology has ever come up for me in the buying process, or the selling process, if you like, is somebody said, oh, thank God this is built in Bubble, because I don't know the platform very well, but I know that there's a lot of resources. I know there's a great community. So it was actually a positive that it was built in no code rather than not being, which I thought was awesome. Yeah.
Hi.
Hey.
2 parts to my question. How do you know when to sell, and why do you choose to sell when you do?
Yeah, that's a tough question. Okay, so I think 2 ways of answering it. In the experience that I've had so far of selling things, it's come from just the personal situation that I was in at the time. So, Kelly said earlier, her mom was ill. I had this similar situation. My mom was ill, and that's when I flew back to the UK, and I was like, I don't want to work on anything right now. So I flew back to the UK, and I sold it in the airport lounge on the way to get rid of it. So some of it is personal circumstance. I'm lucky that I can, lucky, whether you call it luck or just hard work or both, I don't know, that I can do that because I've put so much away in savings that I don't have to work if I don't want to, but it's literally only from selling these things. I've just saved as much as I could to give myself a personal barrier. So there is like a financial consideration, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's like the leading consideration for me. But yeah, I think that's mainly around like the 2 main things for me is just personal circumstances, or the last one is when I've hit the goal, right, the financial goal for whatever that product was. Like, I know damn well I'll be working on something else in 6 weeks' time, in 3 months' time, whatever. I know I'm going to be on to the next thing. And so for me, it's like if I've hit the goal that I wanted to hit, then I'm happy. And I actually have a list I use Trello for a lot of things, so I have cards in Trello of financial goals that I wanted to hit. And it literally starts at $1. Right? I made my first $1 online when I was like 14 or 15, but I started again recently, and I basically have just been going up the ladder, and I went back to that beginning. And what I showed you on that spreadsheet is basically how I think about it all the time now. It's like, okay, if I can sell this for $3 million, if I can sell it for whatever, that's the goal. And if it's going brilliantly well, then we'll see when I get there if I want to sell it or not. But for the most part, it's like if I've hit the thing that I wanted to do, I know I'm already mentally on to the next thing. So I just know myself well enough now to be like, I need to get out. Yeah.
Is that our final question? We'll do this as our final one, yeah?
Hello, I saw that you mentioned Bubble and WordPress within your stack. Do you feel that you have to use WordPress for SEO, or Bubble is good enough?
I feel I have to use it because it's the tool that I know best. Like, I was building on WordPress, ages ago. It was the first no-code tool that I've ever used was WordPress, and I still love WordPress. I think a lot of people have really moved on, and especially when Webflow came along, like people are saying that WordPress is dead and whatever. I don't think it is. I love it, and will continue to build on WordPress. But what I typically do is I build the marketing website on WordPress, and then the app, it lives on Bubble. Mainly because of SEO. And that's not to say that WordPress is the best for SEO. It's just that I know it the best, and so that's why I stick with it. Yeah. Okay. Is that it?
Awesome. Thanks so much,
All right,
Millie.
thank
That
you
was
very
really,
much.
really
Thank
great.
you.